Welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast, a peek into the minds and strategies of the world's greatest copywriters, marketers, and persuasion experts. And now, here's your host, Brian Casangina.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast. Now, for me, a much anticipated day has finally arrived, not just because of the caliber of guests we've got on, but because I consider this man, one of the good people in the industry, a personal friend, a guy I've worked with as well. So I'd like everybody to welcome one of my personal favorite marketers to the call, Todd Brown. Thanks for coming on, Todd.
Of course, man, this is long overdue, right? We should have done this much earlier, but I'm glad that we were able to finally connect and get it on the calendar. And so excited to be with you, man.
Yeah, I can remember mentioning this to you I don't know how long ago, but I'm glad that we were finally able to sync up because I know that I've studied your work for many years. I've been to some of your events, which was awesome. I've studied a lot of your stuff, bought a lot of your products. So I know that what you've got to share today is going to be really valuable to the group here. So for those who have been living on Mars and not quite sure about who Todd Brown is, can you start off with a bit of a story, how you got started and how you came up with what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so I would say I've been in the direct response world for about 2 decades, so just about 20 years. And to keep the story real brief, I was working for a health club company in New Jersey, and I got a direct mail piece, a direct response direct mail piece offering a kind of a fitness training marketing program. And it was the first time that I had ever seen a direct response, like a long form direct response piece. And so I asked my boss at the time if I could buy it and expense it. It was a few $100s. He said yes. I got this thing in the mail. It was at the time when these gigantic courses were sent in the mail. There was, like a diskette and cassette tapes and binders and whatnot. And that was my first exposure to, guys like Gary Halbert and Dan Kennedy and just this whole world of direct response, long form copy. And so I was so enamored and blown away that I called the guy who created the program and I asked him who he had really studied and learned from. Of course, he said Gary Halbert, Dan Kennedy, and then I began studying those guys. And while I was studying those guys, I was starting to implement some stuff in the fitness facilities, and some stuff, needed to be tweaked and changed and whatnot. Well, I ended up over the next I think couple of years, I grew my department to a multi-million-dollar department, largely off of the back of this new direct response kind of stuff and goodies that I learned. And then I really just got bit by the bug to share with others kind of the stuff that I had learned, that I had tweaked, that I had implemented in the fitness facilities. And so I started helping massage therapists with their marketing, growing their practices using direct response. And it just took off, and eventually it took off. I ended up leaving my job at the health club company after many, many years, moved my family down to South Florida, which is where we are now. And then I ended up going into just multiple industries after that. Worked with chiropractors and dentists and martial arts school owners. And then I just started sharing with the kind of the mainstream entrepreneurial world how I was putting together funnels. And really, I skipped over kind of how I developed or learned the foundation of the E5 method, but the rest is really history. Today, I'm blessed to work with some big companies, entrepreneurs doing, million more, 10 million, 50 million. We've got clients that are, over 100 million. And so it's been quite a ride, man.
Yeah. And I'm glad that that you've gone through all of that, because so many of us have benefited from what we're going to talk about today, which is the E5 method. And I know that you've got a ton of case studies, and I've seen the methodology in practice, which is why I'm so excited to sort of dissect that today with you. And it might be fairly obvious to some in the industry that you get Todd Brown on a call. We're going to discuss the E5 method, but I think that that's a good thing. Sometimes things can be sort of a little bit obvious like that, but there's a reason for it, because the E5 method is so good and so proven, and it's also quite rare for somebody to really come up with a genuinely original system like that. And I think that it would be remiss of us not to dive into that, especially when it's got the potential to help so many people. So I'd love for our listeners to know more about the E5 method and how they can apply it in their business.
Yeah. So I'll say this. Let me start with this. So, I would, I don't know if I would say original, because I believe that, we've all learned from others and stood on the shoulders of giants, that have come before us.
Yeah.
And so I owe a tremendous amount of credit to a number of people. But the thing to really understand, I think, how I was really able to kind of condense this, how I was really able to come up with this method. And at the root, the E5 method is a process, a methodology for creating a unique type of marketing campaign that is used to acquire buyers, customers, clients. It's a front-end campaign that is used to bring in, new buyers. And so really where this came from was that I was really blessed early on, man, I was introduced to Mark Ford. Mark, for those folks that don't know who Mark is he wrote under the pen name Michael Masterson for many years. I think he's got 18, I think he told me last time, 18 or so published books, many of which are Wall Street Journal bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. The book Ready, Fire, Aim is one of his most popular books, which I believe he's doing an updated version of. Well, Mark is really the marketing, kind of what I would call the marketing mastermind behind the Agora companies. The Agora companies are really the 800-pound gorilla in the world of direct response, right? A $1.5 billion a year company. They mostly sell financial newsletters, alternative health newsletters, but they are the 800-pound gorilla. And so I had the good fortune of meeting Mark. I was introduced to Mark by my good friend, Rich Sheffrin, many, many moons ago. We all live within 10, 15 minutes of each other. And so I not only got to know Mark, but I got into this world of Agora, this kind of publishing empire based on, old school direct response. And so I always had one foot in the kind of the Agora world, that old school direct response world, and one foot in the internet marketing world. And so what I was able to do, and it's interesting because really until the kind of the E5 method was introduced, those two worlds never really intersected, meaning there are a lot of things that Agora does and does really well that the internet marketing folks just don't do or ignore or don't understand. And there's a lot of things that the internet marketing folks do well that the folks in Agora didn't know and didn't understand. And so I was able to see the intersection between those two and really bring together the best of what I understood about what was working in the internet marketing world and what was working in Agora. And that kind of intersection became the E5 method, became this way of engineering a unique type of campaign, which just performs like gangbusters. And the funny thing is it performs like gangbusters, both in the Agora world today and in the internet marketing world. And so does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's definitely, you're definitely right about it, like not being like something you invented out of thin air. There's the old saying that the pioneers got shot full of arrows, but you've used the inspiration of these different sources, especially like Agora, to come up with something that really works for you. So, and works for a lot of people. So I'm really interested to dive in exactly how the E5 method works and how we can use it.
Yeah, so let's start with a foundational point that might seem almost insignificant, but it is extremely significant, and that is this: that, and then I'm going to tell you this one thing that Mark told me, which changed the entire trajectory of my entrepreneurial career, and really, it's what led to the start of the formation of the E5 method.
Yeah.
First, though, is what a lot of entrepreneurs, what a lot of marketers online don't understand, that I really didn't understand early on, is that marketing and selling are not the same activity. And there are a lot of people that will use the term sales funnel, marketing funnel, online sales, online marketing. They'll use it interchangeably as if it is the same thing. But marketing and selling are two completely different activities with two completely different objectives. Selling is what you do when you are talking to a prospect who already knows the type of product that they want, and they really want to know, why is yours better than the other options, right? And so selling is when you are talking about your product, when you're talking about the deliverables, the features, when you're talking about it, maybe the advantages, the benefits of your product or service, when you're talking about price, terms, guarantee, bonuses, when you're talking about your company, your product's track record, all of that is selling. But marketing is about the prospect, and marketing is about the prospect's challenges, the prospect's obstacles, the prospect's frustrations. And it's really all about leading the prospect to want your product or service before you ever even talk about your product or service. And that's why I love what Peter Drucker, the greatest management guru ever, said about marketing. He said the job of marketing, the objective of marketing, is to make selling superfluous, to make selling unnecessary. And really what he meant was that when marketing is done the right way, the sales portion, and I say that with air quotes, is really a matter of presenting a great offer, right? It's not a matter of twisting somebody's arm. It's not a matter of using shenanigans and weird language patterns and all that. It's a matter of presenting an offer to somebody that then wants your product or service. And so the job of marketing is to take a prospect's desire for a result, an outcome, a transformation, and to turn it into demand for our product or service before we ever even introduce the product or service. That right there alone, Brian, was a huge kind of mind shift for me, because what I was taught early on, which I no longer agree with today, is that marketing is just salesmanship in print. Right. And this was said by, it's the direct response guys. Yeah. And I've got this library at home that I love and adore and cherish. And the most valuable shelf for me is the books of legends, the old school direct response guys. But the reality is that what we're not simply just pitching a product. We're not simply just talking today to the people that are already in the market for our exact product, because that is a small segment of the overall marketplace. Today, we have the ability to take people that maybe aren't even in the market for our type of product and lead them to want our product through our marketing. And so you have to start with this understanding of the difference between marketing and selling. I'm a marketer. I'm not a salesperson. I hate sales. I'm not good at it. I don't like it. I don't like doing it. Fortunately, when you understand effective marketing, you can set up the sale to naturally occur, to be a natural extension of what it is that you do. And so before I go on, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's a great distinction, between marketing and selling, where they're often used interchangeably, like you said. And so basically, what we really want is moving on from Peter Drucker's amazing quote, is we really want more marketing than sales. Would that be right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I what I would say is that is that through better marketing, we can create more sales. Because see, without this can turn into a rabbit hole. And so I want to be careful with this, but when you look at, when you look at the different levels of prospect awareness, right, which Eugene Schwartz really pioneered many, many moons ago in one of the greatest, if not the greatest marketing book ever published, Breakthrough Advertising. He talked about there's unaware, there's problem aware, there's solution aware, there's product aware, and there's most aware, right? In your market, every marketplace is made up of people in those different levels, at those different levels. Well, I realized that the size of the universe shrinks as you go up levels. And so I present the prospect awareness levels as a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid is unaware. At the top of the pyramid is most aware. As you go up, when you go from unaware, when you're targeting unaware and you're now targeting problem aware, the universe shrinks. When you go from problem aware to solution aware, the universe shrinks even more, and up to product aware, it shrinks that much more. When you go to most aware, that's the smallest kind of percentage of people in your marketplace. Well, the reality is that when you focus on selling, when you focus on pitching a product and talking about your product and talking about the benefits of the product and what the product will do, that only works with people that are in those higher levels of awareness, meaning it works with a smaller universe of people. But if you want to be able to tap into the bigger universe of people, the problem aware, people that are aware that they have a problem, but they're not aware maybe of the different solutions out there, let alone your product, or even the people that are unaware that they have a problem and therefore they're not even in the market for a product. In order to convert those people, you have to start with marketing. You can't start with selling because they're not interested in your product. And so it's not just a matter of pitching a product. It's a matter of turning somebody's desire into demand. And you do that, you only do that with marketing. And so let me tell you what Mark told me that kind of, this was right. I started to understand this and I started to see this in the world of Agora. And I knew that, when Mark started really guiding Agora, they were like a $10 million company and they grew to today, 1.5 billion. But when I was talking to Mark, they were, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I said, what was responsible for Agora's growth? Like, why was Agora able to grow so much, right? And I certainly expected him to tell me that it was they had a lot of capital, they had a huge email list, or they did a ton of traffic. And while all of those things were true, that's not what Mark said. What Mark said, which changed, like I said, the entire trajectory of my entrepreneurial journey, he said to me, he said, Todd, we realized early on that we are really in the idea business. That's the business that we are in. We're in the business of developing and disseminating interesting, compelling, often contrarian ideas that immediately grab the marketplace's attention, ideas that they view as fresh, timely, unique, and different, ideas that they haven't heard before that they want to hear more of. And it was that statement that sent me off to learn. It sent me off really on a multi-year journey to understand what Mark was really referring to as the big marketing idea. And that became the first piece of the E5 method, understanding that behind every marketing campaign is an idea, and the quality of the idea trumps everything else. Meaning, right, like that a big marketing idea can carry a marketing campaign, even if it has weaker copy, a weaker headline, right? But you tend to see very hyperbolic, exaggerated copy loaded with these kind of ridiculous claims and a bunch of adjectives and adverbs. You see that copy come about from a weak idea. They're starting with a weak, ordinary, run-of-the-mill idea behind their campaign, and they're trying to make that weak, ordinary idea sound great. And so the only way that they can do it is with puffery, but with the words that they use. But what I realized was that most of the biggest, most successful campaigns, both offline and online, were built on the back of big marketing ideas, just great interesting, compelling, emotionally compelling, intellectually interesting ideas that were unique and different. And when you start with that, you don't have to use puffery or exaggeration. You let the idea shine through. And so that is one of the first principles within the engineering stage of the E5 method that we teach people how to do, how to, understanding the difference between an ordinary marketing idea and a big marketing idea, and understanding how to form and develop and find seeds of big ideas that they can then use in their marketing to stand out and get attention.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's one of the things that when I create a campaign for myself or a client, it's one of the things I spend the most time coming up with, that big idea that really breaks through.
Yeah.
This is part of the first stage of E5.
This is part of the second stage. So the first part of the first stage of E5, right? E5 consists of 5 stages. The first stage is the examination stage. And while this is the stage where we're looking at competitors, we're starting with prospects, we're then examining competitors. And then of course, we're examining the product that we're about to engineer a campaign for. Only after we've done the right level of examination do we then go on to the engineering stage. So we don't engineer anything. We don't begin to put together a marketing campaign or an E5 campaign until we really have a full scope and understanding of the marketplace. First and foremost, the prospects, right? What do they want? What are their desires? What are their fears? What are their obstacles? What problem are they dealing with or issue? What are their emotions, their feelings? What are their beliefs? And then we go on to competitors, and we're looking at a couple of things with competitors. We're looking at their offers, so that when we construct what we call, which is part of the E5 method, a SIN offer, our aim is to create an offer that's superior to competitors. So we have to look at their offers and the different components of their offers. And we're also looking at how are they positioning their product or their mechanism, which I'm sure you and I will get into. And then only after we've examined prospects and then we've looked at what competitors are saying to prospects and how they're positioning their product or service and the offer that they're presenting, do we then go on now with that kind of as the filter to examine the product, to uncover really what it is that we're going to use when we go into the engineering stage. And then within the engineering stage, one of the steps is the big marketing idea. It's not the first step, but it's one of the steps.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of people make, and certainly not been immune to it myself. There's the old saying that build it and they will come, and they even made movies about that kind of thing. But that's just part of Hollywood fantasy. If you don't have the audience there, if you don't do that examination stage, then you could be wasting a whole lot of time and money engineering stuff that nobody wants.
Yeah, because you're so right, Brian, because it's all about the prospect. At the end of the day, and this is something that often, marketers, copywriters can take for granted, but it's all about the prospect. We have to learn to get out of the way. It's not about what interests us, what compels us, what motivates us, what would drive us. It's all about the marketplace. It's all about prospects. And so we not only have to understand what prospects want, right? What is the perfect solution to them? What aspects of a solution do they not want? What are they struggling with? What are their frustrations, their fears, their obstacles, their issues? What do they believe that could impact what it is that we say or what it is that we choose not to say? We have to kind of understand that. And then we have to understand what it is that they've been exposed to already in terms of marketing messages from competitors, because, differentiation, having something different to say, a different idea, a different angle, a different perspective, a different story is critical, because different gets attention, right? Like a lot of marketers, a lot of entrepreneurs, they mistakenly think that better, like if my thing is better, or if I make it sound better, that's what gets attention. But the reality is that better doesn't always get attention. And not to mention that what prospects expect a marketer to say is that their product is better, right? Like by you saying mine is the best, that's not a surprise to them. That's what they expect you to say, right? They don't expect you to say mine is the third best or the fourth best, right? They expect you to say that yours is the best. And so, right, different gets attention. And so we've got to have something different to say. Well, in order to know what would be different, what would be common, what would be ordinary, we have to understand the marketplace. We have to understand prospects, and we have to understand and see what it is that competitors have already said. Because what we don't want to do is simply model or copy the idea, the word choice, and everything like that being used by competitors, because that's simply a recipe for creating more noise in the marketplace. And so the other thing that you said that I think is also spot on is there's this weird kind of mentality, certainly in the internet marketing space, if you will, that, there's this, especially from new marketers and entrepreneurs and copywriters, that they think that, number one, if they publish the page, right? Like I put up an opt-in page, I put up a VSL, I put up an order form, and therefore it should be working, right? Because I said X in my VSL, folks should believe me. They should be buying. It's all right. Like they think that just because they publish it, that it's going to work. And they think that there's magic, the kind of the magic, if you will, or the power is in the pages. Like they think that the power is, I've got a lead magnet, I've got a lead generation page, I've got a VSL page, I've got an order form, and they think that so my campaign is set up correctly. But the reality is that the magic, the power is not in the pages. The power is in what's being said on those pages. The power is in the message. The power is in the idea behind what's being said, and then how it's being communicated, and then ultimately the offer in the end.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, everything that you're going through is so insightful. I'm just sitting here tempted to sort of dive into that, but we can probably go on for days like that. But so we've got examination and engineering is the first two stages of E5.
Yes. And then we've got evaluation. The next three are evaluation, enhance, and then expand. So the evaluation stage is the stage that we go into after we've engineered an E5 campaign. So an E5 campaign consists of elements like a big marketing idea. There is a emotionally hooking lead, which is the first 350, 500 words of the marketing campaign. Yeah. We present, of course, we're introducing a unique mechanism. And then we've got the marketing argument, which is there to prove that our mechanism, the way that our product or service works to deliver the result is superior to every other product or service out there, right? And so what we're doing, we're constructing or engineering this campaign that introduces a unique mechanism, a unique way of experiencing the result or outcome that the prospect wants. Then we're proving it. We're getting buy-in on the unique mechanism. And then we are going into what we call the presentation of a SIN offer, which is how they get the unique mechanism with the product and the offer. Well, when we initially engineer an E5 campaign, we always engineer what's called a minimum viable funnel. So before we create, like, let's say the upsell, if we're going to use an upsell, a downsell, before we create the back end, and anything like that, what we want to do is we want to prove the profitability, the viability of the core campaign. And so, right, there are people that have spent a ton of time creating a campaign and creating upsells and downsells and a second upsell in the back end. And then they launch the campaign and the campaign doesn't work. Well, nobody sees the upsell. Nobody sees the downsell. Nobody sees the second upsell. Nobody sees the back end because nobody's buying. So before you waste any time and energy and effort and money creating those other pieces, we want to evaluate the minimum viable funnel. And so we've got a process. I won't bore folks with the whole process, but there's a process for rolling it out. We roll it out so that we can prove the viability and profitability of our core elements first. Once we do that, then we go to the enhancing stage, and the enhancing stage is where we turn that MVF into a full-blown into a full-blown campaign. So that's where we add in all the pieces that are not included in the minimum viable funnel. Once we've gone through the enhancing stage and we've turned it into a full-blown campaign, then we go into the expanding stage. And the expanding stage is really it's a fancy way of saying scale. This is where we pump more and more people into the campaign that we've now tested, proven, enhanced, and now we just drive more and more, more and more people into the campaign so that you get more and more buyers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that has always been really interesting to me. Once you get to that stage of something, you've got something working at a certain level, how do you scale up? How do you decide how much you want to spend on traffic, and how do you really what happens during the process of that scaling up and that enhancement?
Well, so I'll say this, which I think will be more valuable for folks to hear and understand. So one of the other just transformational lessons that I learned, and I think this was just kind of more from learning. This was more observation and kind of and pondering than it was somebody telling me this. But when I understood this, what I'm about to say, it also changed so much for me. And that is this, man, that we are really just investors, man. As entrepreneurs, as business owners, even, copywriters that are working for an entrepreneur business owner, marketing and the acquisition of customers is really just a game of investing. And what I mean by that, Brian, is that we're investors. We're investing in the acquisition of assets. Those assets happen to be customers. And just like any asset, those assets have a value today, the amount of money that a new customer spends with us when they become a new customer. And that asset has a future value. The future value of a customer, sometimes referred to as lifetime value, right, is all about how much more that customer, once we've got them, goes on to spend with the business. At the same time, right? So that's the kind of the asset side of the investing game that we're playing, right? Then there's the cost, right? So then there is, well, what does it cost us to acquire a new buyer, right? So just like any investment, right? What we're looking at is, what is it going to cost me to acquire this asset? What is the asset worth to me today, right? And what is the asset worth to me in the future? And so I'm sharing that here and now in this context because, right, you had said, like, what do I spend on traffic? Well, one of the first things that I would advise people to do is to stop using the word spend when it comes to traffic, right? Because this idea of how much should I spend? What should my marketing budget be? The idea of a marketing budget is really something that comes from the world of brand institutional advertising. It's really something that comes from the typical mom and pop business owner out in the world who is not using direct response and is therefore using brand institutional advertising, which is very difficult to track, to measure, to quantify. And so because it's different, meaning that it's hard to, we're running 3 different radio ads, we're running a billboard, and we're running a small space ad. Well, it's difficult for brand institutional advertisers to know where the sales are coming from. And so because they're unable to assign an ROI easily to these different assets that they're using, they roll with a marketing budget. They say, we're only going to spend $10,000 a month on our advertising. But in direct response, one of the beauties of direct response is that it's all metric driven. It's all data driven. So everything is measurable, quantifiable. We know for every dollar that we put out, how much we make back. Do we make back $1, $2, $3, $4? And so I'm sharing that because the reality is that once you know your numbers, assuming that you are tracking properly and you understand what it's costing you to acquire an asset and you understand what that asset is, and let's just keep things real simple for a second, Brian. Let's say that it costs us $50 to get a new buyer. Right. So we spend $500 on an advertising campaign on Facebook or YouTube or Google or whatever. We spend $500 on an advertising campaign on paid traffic, and we generate 10 buyers. So that means that it costs us $50 per buyer. We have what's called a cost per acquisition, a CPA, of $50.
Yeah.
Well, let's say we know that we've got our E5 campaign in place. And just for simplicity, let's say that we know that every buyer that goes through our campaign spends $50 with us. So we know that we've got a cost per acquisition of 50, and we know that every buyer that we acquire spends 50 with us. Well, in that example, what that means is that we are acquiring buyers, customers for free. Our bank account is no less today than it was a week ago, except now we've got 10 new buyers that we can then put into our back end. And all of our profit it comes from the second transaction, the third transaction, the fourth transaction, the fifth transaction. The single most valuable asset in every business is the customer base, the customer database. And so in that one example, if I know that every time I spend $50 to acquire a buyer, that buyer is going to spend $50 with me on average. Some might spend less, some might spend more, but in direct response, we use averages. So I'm spending 50, I'm making back 50, and I'm getting a buyer. I'm acquiring new customers, new buyers, the single most valuable asset in my business for free. Well, why would I use a budget? Why would I artificially place a limit on what it is that I can invest? Why would I ever say, should I only spend 10,000 or 5,000 or 3,000 or 50,000? Why would I do that? Because every time I put out 50, I get back 50 and I get a buyer that I can continue to sell to. And so the reality is when you know those numbers, it's not an expense. So we're not spending money, we're investing it to get back a buyer that then we're going to continue to deliver more and more value to and generate more and more, revenue. And that revenue is bottom line revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if more entrepreneurs had that sort of insight into what everything was doing, that they'd be probably a little more courageous about acquiring customers and even going negative on the front end. If you want, like you're thinking like an investor, you could invest like $10 in each customer. If you're like in your example, say if you could be like a cost per customer of $60, and then you're spending $10 per customer, but you make it up on the back end. That's really where the returns come in.
Yeah, that's really, you're spot on. That's really how some of the biggest, direct response companies operate, right? They are truly operating as investors. They're looking at what is the value, the whole value of the buyer. See, the typical mom and pop entrepreneur is very transactionally minded. They're looking at, they want to produce a certain amount of profit on every transaction, regardless of whether it's the first transaction with a brand new buyer or the 10th transaction with a long-term customer. The typical entrepreneur, the typical mom and pop is thinking transactionally. I want a 50% margin on every sale. But the savvy direct response marketer understands that we're investors, and the money, the big money, the profit is made on the back end, on the second, third, fourth, fifth transaction in a business. And so our aim on the front end is maximum customer acquisition. We want to acquire the most amount of customers that we possibly can. And so the more that you can invest to acquire a customer, the more customers that you can acquire, and the easier the game becomes, right? So you take any business that says, that says to themselves, let's say there's a business that, generates, ongoing sales once they've gotten a buyer. Let's take a health club, for example, where somebody joins the club and they remain a member for months or maybe even years. Right. Well, and let's say right now they're thinking transactionally. And so they want a margin. And so because let's say the average member is worth, call it $50 a month. And when they join, they only spend, let's just keep this, keep it, the same and simple. Yeah. Let's say, right, the new member joins, they only spend $50. And then every 30 days after that, they're going to spend $50 again. And so the health club says, well, we only then want to spend $25 to get a new gym member. We're only willing to invest $25 to get a new gym member because we want to generate a profit on every sale. Well, you and I come along in our new health club and we understand the game of direct response being investing. And we say, you know what, we're willing to spend $50 to acquire a new gym member, knowing that we're not going to generate any profit on that initial transaction, but we're going to generate profit on the second month, the third month, the fourth month, the fifth month. Well, now we're competing with a health club with other competitors that are only willing to spend 25, and we're willing to spend 50. There's a lot more that we can do. We can pay more per click. We can have marketing that's not even performing as well as theirs. Like, there's just so much more of an advantage. And then, of course, if we were willing to go negative, if we said, hey, the average member stays with us for 10 months, meaning that they're worth $500. And so let's spend $80 to get a new gym member, knowing that big deal. So we'll go $30 negative in month one. We're going to be profitable in month two. And then we're going to make that much more in month three, month four, month five. But now we're able to spend $80 to get a customer. Who's going to win? The one who can only spend or is only willing to spend 25, or the one who's willing to spend 80? The one who's willing to spend 80. It's going to crush
it. You're going to win.
Right? Is going to crush it. And so again, that's why I say that it really is a game of investing. So many entrepreneurs have been taught to look at marketing as an expense, and they've been taught to look for a profit, a margin on every transaction. And they are leaving a tremendous amount of money on the table because of that.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you went so in depth there. I mean, you could probably talk for days in reality, but a lot of the issues that I see with marketers and with specifically marketers and copywriters who are listening to this show, a lot of them have offers already, and a lot of them are buying traffic, and a lot of them have a reluctance to break even or go negative. They'll want to make that profit on the front end. Obviously not all of them, but this is one of the things that when I'm talking to clients, it's one of the first things I want them to do. Invest more in acquiring these customers, become that investor. So have a little more courage to break even or go negative on the front end. And that courage comes from knowing your numbers on the back end. So I really appreciate you detailing that.
Awesome. And I would say, Brian, for what it's worth, man, I would say the reality is that it's not even really, you don't even need courage when you know the numbers. When I say investing, right, most of the time people immediately think like speculation. Like when you invest in a stock, let's say, what most people are doing is they're investing because they believe that the stock is going to go up at some point in the future. But the beauty with direct response is that over time, as your business continues to grow and you acquire more customers, you will know what the average lifetime value is. Remember that word, average. That's what we use in the world of direct response. And so you will know what the average buyer is worth to you. So there is no guessing assumptions. There's no speculation. We know what the asset is worth today. We know what the future value of that asset is. And therefore we can make a decision about how we want to invest to acquire that asset. Now, of course, let me give one caveat, Brian, and that is this, that the only time everybody on here, everybody listening to this can either for themselves or for their clients can certainly go operate at break even. Meaning where whatever a customer is worth to you today, on average, you should be willing to spend 100% of that to get a new buyer. It'll change the game for you. But nobody should go negative until, number one, they know their metrics. So that you have to have your tracking done properly, set up properly. You have to have accurate metrics, and you have to know what the future value of a buyer is, the 1 month value, 2 months, 6 month, 9 month, and so on. And you, of course, if to go negative, you have to have the cash flow to be able to float that, right? So if we were going $30 negative on every buyer in the example that we covered, and we weren't recouping that $30 negative for another 30 days, well, if you're generating thousands of buyers every single week, you're going to have the cash flow to float in order to do that. And so, okay.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Some of the things I would like to cover, and I always kind of come back to your materials, to the E5 course, and I think to myself, well, what would Todd Brown do? What would be in line with the E5 method? that's why I really want to get you on the show to really explain this to the listeners.
Well, man, that's humbling. I got to be honest with you. That's because you are, a copywriting phenom. And so that is humbling. And I love hearing that. It puts a smile on my face, man. But and I'm honored to know that.
It's just the truth. And it's something that I've studied for a while. And this is why I wanted to really expose this to the listeners, get you on the show and get them, to dive into the E5 method to the depth that I have. So, how do people find out more about the E5 method? Because I know you've gone over a lot of stuff. It's a lot to take in, and I know that you have some really good, education around this subject that people can take in.
Yeah, I think I would tell people, your listeners, to go to e5methodbook.com. And I would tell them to grab the book bundle. I think it's, I think the team is basically giving it away, or it's $10 or something like that. I would tell folks, I would encourage them to get the audio version, which I'm sure by the time this is published, that'll be available. I just finished that the other day.
Oh, cool.
But the audio version has some additional kind of commentary and a little expanded. And I'll send you a copy. I'll make sure that you get a copy, Brian, to enjoy.
Cool. Thanks, man. Can't wait for that.
Yeah. That and then I would they'll get an invite to our Facebook group, which they definitely want to jump in, because I share a whole bunch of stuff in there. And so that's what I would recommend, e5methodbook.com.
Yeah, for sure. And the Facebook group is great as well. I know that especially lately, you've been jumping in with a lot of resources, a lot of great information. So that's definitely well worth it. But when people get the book, they'll get those resources, and it's a book that I highly recommend. It's a must-have for anybody. I've got my electronic copy, which, as I said, I refer to all the time, as well as the full course and everything. But e5methodbook.com, was it?
Yep, you got it.
methodbook.com. If you're listening on iTunes, go to that website right now. It's an absolute no-brainer for the kind of marketing systems that you're about to get. Very, very simple to implement, but actually one of the most effective systems there is. So go to e5methodbook.com and check that out. There's no kickback to me. All I wanted to do is share the E5 method with everybody. So I really appreciate you taking us through that, Todd. It's been very insightful. I probably say this about every guest, but in this case, it's 110% true that you've delivered far more value than was necessary, and I thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure, man. We'll have to do this again for sure, because there's so much more that I know you and I we could talk certainly for hours, you and I, maybe next time we'll get into the weeds on, copy messaging, but this was long overdue. And like I said, I was really looking forward to this. I'm glad that we were able to connect, and I'm just so grateful, man, to have you in our tribe as using the E5 method. And so thank you so much, man.
Yeah, of course. We'll definitely do this again. I'll have my team get in touch with your team, and we'll have to have you back on, because it's like you said, we can really get into the weeds and some of the copy stuff. And that's kind of what I've been like, resisting the temptation to do that. And then, this episode is going to go for about like 3 or 4 hours at a minimum. Yeah, we'll do this again sometime soon. In the meantime, anybody who's listening on iTunes or on the website, go to e5methodbook.com. You absolutely can't go wrong. It's probably going to be the best ROI of any book that you ever get. So go to e5methodbook.com. Thanks again, Todd. And we will do this again real soon.
Sounds great, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Geniuses of Copywriting with Brian Casangina. To get the full transcript and all the resources mentioned on today's show, go to www.geniusesofcopywriting.com now.